There we go. All right, try that again. We lost Arthur and Anne. Arthur, Anne, are you still there? Hello?
Screen name is still up.
Yeah. All right, I guess we'll get started. Hopefully, Arthur, Anne, can you hear us?
Okay.
Now we lost him. Da, 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 da. Okay, I think they'll hopefully join back. Can you see the source sheet? Okay,
I can.
so, okay, good. We're in Parshat Chayei Sarah. Arthur, are you back? Parshat Chayei Sarah. So it's there we go.
Okay.
You're back.
I never was gone.
You never were gone.
No.
Okay, well we missed you for a brief moment there.
Oh,
All right.
okay.
So Chayei Sarah, of course, begins with the recording of the death of Sarah, Avraham's negotiations and purchase of burial plot in Me'arat Machpelah in Hebron. And then the Parsha switches to describing the search for a wife for Yitzchak. A lot of very interesting details shared in the mission of the servant, who is never, everyone likes to point out, he's never identified as Eliezer in the Parsha, but we all assume that it's Eliezer. And the test that he sets up to identify the appropriate wife, and I guess we'll call it the negotiation with the family to allow Rivka to come back with him. And it concludes with the very romantic scene of the first time that Yitzchak and Rivka meet as he's davening mincha out in the field. Very interesting parsha. We're going to remain focused primarily on the very, very beginning, although a little bit towards the end when we have not only, we also have the death of Avraham. So the parsha opens, Vayu Chayei Sarah, Mea Shana ve'esrim Shana ve'sheva Shanim Shnei Chayei Sarah. The way that I think this is the JPS is translating it as Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life came to 127 years. And so Rashi picks up on the fact that the syntax is quite strange. Right? It says Mea Shana ve'esrim Shana ve'sheva Shanim, 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. Why doesn't it just say 127 years? So he quotes the Medrash that says, "L'kach nichtav shana b'chol bichlal klal klal." It says shana after each number. Lomar lacha shekol echad nidrash la'atzmo, to teach us that each one teaches its own unique lesson. Bat kuf kebat ket chaf lechet. So when she was 100, she was like a 20-year-old when it came to sins. And there's a tradition that says we think of a person begins bearing responsibility and accountability for their sins at the age of bar and bat mitzvah, but there's another opinion that says it's at the age of 20. So that's to say that at the age of 100, she was like someone who didn't have any sins. Sharei ena bat onshin, af bat kuf belochi, right? Uvat kaf kebat sheva liyofi. And when she was 20, she was like a 7-year-old for beauty. We don't really think of 7-year-olds and 20-year-olds in the same type of beauty categories. But the point is that she was, she didn't fit the typical descriptions of someone of her age. And then he says, Shnei Chayei Sarah, it again repeats the years of Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah. Kulan Shavin Letova, they were all equally good. All the days, all the years of Sarah were equally good. We'll skip, actually, no, let's, so then sort of in a parallel, not exactly parallel, but when we read of Avraham's death, we're told, Ele Yemei Shnei Chayei Avraham Asher Chai, Me'at Shana V'Shivim Shana V'Chamesh Shanim. So these are the days of the life of Avraham, who lived 100 years and 70 years and 5 years. Again, that each number is separated by the word Shana, which seems to be superfluous. Vayigva vayamat Avraham b'seva tova zakin v'saveya v'ye'asef el amav. Avraham breathed his last, dying at a good ripe age, old and contented, and he was gathered to his kin. So people ask, both on the description of the death of Sarah and the death of Avraham, in both of them, at least when it comes to Sarah, with Rashi's explanation, that we're told that they lived a very good, satisfying life. And everyone says, what are you talking about? Sarah lived a good life. Sarah lived a happy life. Think of all the stuff that happened to Sarah in the course of her lifetime, right? We know she struggled tremendously with fertility, and that was a source of great pain for her. She was abducted twice, and if not actually raped, threatened with rape and threatened with some sort of sexual violence against her. When she comes to the conclusion that she's not going to be able to bear children, she tells Avraham to marry the maidservant, the Shifcha Hagar, and then Vatekal be'enei gevirta, she loses stature, right? She's dissed by Hagar, right? So everyone asks, what are you talking about? That Sarah had a great, wonderful life. Sarah had a very difficult life. Maybe, she had a meaningful life. She did great things in her life. But when we think about it, it's not what we would typically describe as being a wonderful, good, easy, satisfying life. And the same can be said about Avraham, right? That Avraham also, right? We know, you read the accounts of all that he went through. He went through very difficult things also. The Mishnah tells us, we'll see in a little bit, the Mishnah says Avram was tested at least 10 times in his life with significant trials. Again, it doesn't seem that either one of them led what we would typically describe as a good, satisfying, fulfilled. I'll take back the description of fulfilling. I think we would agree that they had fulfilling lives, but they had difficult lives. They had not easy lives. And so why are we given this description at the beginning that their lives were so wonderful and so good? That's the major question for tonight.
A good one.
Yeah. So one suggestion offered by Rabbi Sachs, and tonight, I believe it's tonight, begins Rabbi Sachs's yard site. And we might have even seen this explanation in a previous year, but Rabbi Sachs offers one explanation, and this is a very powerful, very famous quote from idea from Nietzsche, which was popularized by Viktor Frankl, and more recently we know that Hirsch Goldberg Polin, when he was taken captive by Hamas, this was sort of the mantra that he lived by, and that we know. I don't know if any of you have read Eli Sharabi's memoir of having his experience in captivity, but this was something that helped him also. He encountered Hirsch in captivity in the tunnels. They were together for a few nights, and this is the line that Hirsch Goldberg Polin said to give himself encouragement, but also to help the other hostages that were being held with him. He who has a why in life can bear almost any how.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very powerful insight. And so Rabbi Sachs wanted to use this idea to answer our initial question. He says as follows: Avraham and Sarah were among the supreme examples in all history of what it is to have a why in life. The entire course of their lives came as a response to a call, a divine voice that told them to leave their home and family, set out for an unknown destination, go to live in a land where they would be strangers, abandon every conventional form of security, have the faith to believe that by living by their standards of righteousness and justice, they would be taking the first step to establishing a nation, a land, a faith, and a way of life that would be a blessing to all humankind. Biblical narrative is, as Eric Auerbach said, fraught with background, meaning that much of the story is left unstated. We have to guess at it. That is why there is such a thing as midrash, filling in the narrative gaps. Nowhere is this more pointed than in the case of the emotions of the key figures. We do not know what Avraham felt or Isaac felt as they walked toward Har HaMoriah. We do not know what Sarah felt when she encounters the harems, first of Paro, then of Avimelech of Gerar. With such conspicuous exceptions, we hardly know what any of the Torah's characters felt, which is why the two explicit statements about Avraham, that God blessed him with everything and that he ended his life old and satisfied, are so important. When Rashi says that all of Sarah's years were equally good, he is attributing to her what the biblical text attributes to Avraham, namely a serenity in the face of death that came from a profound tranquility in the face of life. Avraham knew that everything that happened to him, even the bad things, were part of the journey on which God had sent him and Sarah. And he had the faith to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, fearing no evil, knowing that God was with him. This is what Nietzsche calls the strong heart. In other words, Avraham and Sarah did have a good life, did have a satisfying life. Why? Because they saw the entire arc of their life story as part of that mission that they set out on at the very beginning. Because they were living for a why in the entirety of their life, every bump in the road, every difficulty was just part of making that mission and seeing through that mission to its end and to its logical conclusion. And so they were very happy, Rabbi Sachs contends, because they were living this purpose mission-driven life. And so it's not a misstatement to say that Sarah's years, Kulan Shavin Latorah, they were all equally as good, because she didn't see any of these challenges as being a real deviation from her core life mission. The same for Avraham. Any thoughts or reactions to that?
Oh, that is so beautiful. I was glad to see that they're going to be bringing back more and more of Rabbi Sachs's ideas over
Yes.
the year, I guess. Yeah, there
Yes.
are lots of things planned, evidently. I'm so glad to hear about that. That's so good.
Yes, and I think we desperately need his writing and his voice. So yes, there's a lot coming out.
Especially about how to form a community. That's going to be the main theme of one of them, I heard.
Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay, so that's one approach to this big question about can we really say that Avram and Sarah lived such good, satisfying lives? One answer is yes, we can, because nothing in their life was separate from the ultimate mission and the ultimate vision that they were seeking to fulfill, and so therefore they were totally happy and satisfied with whatever life threw their way, because they were committed to the ultimate to the bigger goal. Second approach. The second approach we already mentioned, right? The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, source number 8. Asara nisyonot nitnasa Avraham Avinu alav hashalom v'amad b'kulam. Avraham was subject to 10 tests, and he passed them all. Odia kama chibatel shel Avraham Avinu alav hashalom, to show how great was the love of Avraham. May he rest in peace. So even though, or maybe specifically because, the Mishnah tells us that there are 10 tests that Avraham withstood, it doesn't tell us what the 10 tests were. So as you can imagine, there are different theories and different positions about what the 10 tests were. Most commentators assume that the final test, the ultimate test in this in this series of 10 tests that he was exposed to, was the Akedat Yitzchak. Right? It has to end with the most difficult of them. But not everyone takes that approach. And one person who thinks differently is Rabbeinu Yonah, who has one of the classical commentaries on Pirkei Avot. We don't need to count. We don't need to go through. Well, why not? Let's look at all of them. Okay, so Asara Nisyonot. So Harishon or Kasdim Sheipiloni Mod Lekishan Ha'esh V'Nitzol. So the first was when he was cast into the furnace in Or Kasdim and he was saved. We spoke about last week how the Torah doesn't tell us this explicitly, but that's the first one. Hasheni Shesiva Letzleit Meretzo. He was commanded to leave his homeland. Shenemar Lech Lecha, when God told him to Lech Lecha, to go for yourself. Hashlishi Shenemar Vahirav Ba'aretz. Af al pisha Kadosh Baruch Hu hivtiach v'amar lo yitbrachu b'cha kol nishpachot ha'adama kashevi harav lo her achar midotav. So when Avram first encounters famine, even though God had promised him that he would be blessed and all the families of the land will be blessed through him, nonetheless Avram doesn't question what's happening. He doesn't doubt God for a second. The fourth test is when Sarah was taken by Paro. The fifth is the war with the four kings, where he rescues Lot. Hashishi ben Tishim v'Tesha shana b'moloat b'sar lato. The sixth is when he circumcised himself at the age of 99. Hashvi'i l'kichat Sarah la'Avimelech. The seventh is when Sarah was taken by Avimelech. Hashmini kashagiresh Hagar v'Yishmael beno b'mitzvat Hashem. The eighth is when he expels Hagar and Ishmael at God's behest. Right? Sarah has the idea. Hashem confirms that it's correct. Hatishi'i la'akedat Yitzchak. The ninth is the Akedah. And ha'asiri kivurat Sarah. The 10th is the burial of Sarah. So he says right at the beginning of our parsha, when Avraham has to find an appropriate place and negotiate with Bnei Chet and with Ephron to acquire the field and the cave, that's the final and the ultimate test of Avraham's life, according to Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay, again, other commentators have different ways that they get to 10 also. But what's significant for us for tonight is that Rabbeinu Yonah, and as we'll see in a second, the Ramban, maintain that the burial of Sarah, the beginning of our parsha, is the 10th test, is one of Avram's tests. So with that, the Ramban, in source number 10, tells us as follows. I'll preface the Ramban by saying, right, I think we're familiar enough with the Parsha, right, that after Sarah is buried and Avraham sends the servant on the mission, so it's really quite astonishing that the Torah goes into such detail about the servant's journey down, his encounter with Rivka at the well, the retelling, almost verbatim, of that encounter with the family when he goes back to try to convince them to allow Rivka to come with him to marry Yitzchak. Right? It's one of, if not the longest prakim in all of Chumash. think it's 65 verses, if I'm remembering correctly.
Uh-huh.
And right, and it seems to be completely superfluous. The whole thing could have been taken care of in 3 verses. He goes down, he brings a lot of gifts, he brings a lot of camels. He says, whichever girl acts kindly to me at the well will be the wife, will be the proper wife. He meets a girl, she gives him water, he goes back, he tells the family he wants to take her to marry. You know, it could have been done in much shorter amount of space, much fewer words. And we know that no every word in the Torah is essential. There is no extra words. So why all the detail? And the Ramban is similarly puzzled by the detail of Avraham's negotiations with Bnei Chet, with Ephron, to acquire the Marat HaMachpelah. Why do we need all these details? Why doesn't the Torah just tell us that Sarah died, Avraham found a field that he thought was appropriate, paid a price, paid for it, and buried Sarah? Why do we need to know all these details? So the Ramban says, so this entire parsha, right? He doesn't mean the parsha Chayei, he means the episode of the negotiation with Bnei Chet, was written to tell us about the kindness of God with Avraham. Shaya Nasi Elokim be'eretz asher bala gorsham. He became a Nasi Elokim. That's how the Chita Bnei Chet describe him, an emissary of God, in the land that he had come only to temporarily sojourn in. V'hayachid v'chol ha'am hayu korin lo Adoni. And right, Ephron, the individual, the entire nation, the entire family, everyone called Avraham Adoni, who master. Who lo amar lahem Cain, and he didn't call them that, meaning he was seen as the superior, even though he's the foreigner. Shayasar v'gadol, he was a great presence. V'gam b'chayav ki'im lo v'agalah shemecha ve'yebracha. So in his life, Hashem fulfilled the promise to him of, I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. V'ishto meitav nikbera b'nachalat Hashem. His wife died and was buried in the portion that God had promised him. And furthermore, because the Torah wants to let us know where the Avot and Imahot are buried, when we have to honor the burial spot of our ancestors. Okay, so according to the Ramban, that's why the details are recorded here to show us the chasadim, the chesed that Hashem did to Avraham. Rabotenu Amru, Shagam Zemin Hayisonot Shel Avraham. Our rabbis say that this is one of the tests of Avraham. Again, not everyone agrees with this being one of the tests, but a significant number of commentaries and traditions do. Shabikesh Makom Likbor Tzarav Lo Matza Ad Shekana Oto. That he needed a place to bury Sarah, and he only succeeded once he paid for it. Okay, we could skip that sentence. And furthermore, to fulfill the promise that God made to him that this land would be his inheritance. Right, that he didn't have to go to a different place, a different land to bury Sarah, but that she is buried in the very land that Avram was promised. Right, and okay. So the Ramban seems to be equally, sort of troubling in the same way that the description of Sarah and Avram's life as being wholly good is problematic. The Ramban tells us that this very same incident of having to negotiate and haggle and find an appropriate place to bury Sarah is both a manifestation of Hashem's chesed to Avraham, and at the same time is Hashem's nisayon, is Hashem's test of Avraham. So normally those two things don't go together. We normally don't think of a trial, of a trying experience, as being a manifestation of kindness, right? If you're showing kindness, there shouldn't be a test. It should be easy, right?
One would think so.
Yeah. So I came across, and I couldn't access the original. So this is just a summary of the idea that Rabbi Simcha Zissel-Broid, I quoted him in Shul a couple weeks ago. Also, he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Chevron. His sefer is called Sam Derech, and so
Oh, yeah. Never have to. Oh,
he
okay.
mentions, right, that according to some, finding the burial plot was the last test. Um, and right, so and we have this general idea that each of the tests became increasingly more difficult. So what makes this the most difficult of all the tests? Okay, even if you want to tell us that the Akedah isn't the last test of Avraham's life, that would seemingly be the most difficult test. Um, and right, why would he need another test after the Akedah? So Rabbi Broid points to the Ramban, who is trying to understand why the Torah divests so many details in the story of buying Sarah burial plot. Ramban notes that it was for Avraham to see the great kindness that Hashem did for him. In Lech Lecha, okay, in Lech Lecha, he's promised, B'Agalah Shemecha, I will make your name great. And here with the Bnei Chet, refer to Avraham as Adoni, Nasi Elokim, also, okay, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, we know Avraham undeniably believes in God, but the last challenge he faced, perhaps even more difficult than the Akedah, was whether or not Avraham would be able to see the great blessing God bestowed upon him. Even though he lived a life of tests and challenges, would he be able to see the promises that were already being fulfilled in his own lifetime? A great name, the land of Israel. This also helps us to understand why Avraham is eulogized later in the Parsha as Saveya, content. That should be content, not contempt.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. Even though he had a difficult life, he saw the good that God did for him. Right. So the test that Avraham is being exposed to, we'll come back to this in a second. We'll come back to Rabbi Broid. Right. So he's saying that part of the test is, yes, we can look at Abraham's life and we can see that there were many challenges and many nisyonot, many trials that he went through, and that even or despite the challenges, right, all these promises that God had made to him did come true. So, right, part of the test, according to this, is Avraham able to see past the difficulty to recognize that there is bracha as well, right? And this is something that we can all sort of relate to, right? That, in difficult times, it doesn't mean that there's not good things happening also. Right? I just keep coming back to the past 2 years with the situation in Israel, and it was horrible, and no one would ever want this anything remotely similar to this to happen. And yet, there were amazing stories and amazing things that came as a result of these very difficult, trying times. Right? The unity, the love that we had for each other, the fact that we were able to eliminate all these horrible leaders of Hamas and in Iran, and the destruction of the nuclear reactor, right? That are we able to see the bracha and the kindness despite or along with the difficulty is one very interesting thing, and that's always that's a truism in life, right? There will always be this complicated reality where, yeah, life is difficult. No one said that life is going to be easy, but along with the difficulty, are we able to see the goodness and the kindness and the bracha that exists that exists along with it? So that's perhaps one way of understanding the challenge, or why this is an appropriate final test for Avraham. Taking it in a slightly different direction, and this is right up your alley. Toby, as I'm sure you know, Toby's working on a doctorate from Yeshiva University, and one of her teachers is Rabbi
Oh,
Dr. Mordechai Schiffman, who is a a rabbi, and he's a professor he has a PhD in psychology, I believe. I think he's a practicing therapist also. And so he's recently published a new book, which I quoted earlier, and I think sorry, I was on the source sheet earlier. I skipped over it. The Torah of Character. So in that book, his chapter on Chayei, he quotes or he references the discipline of dialectical behavior therapy. So this is used, as I understand it, through the help of Wikipedia, primarily in the treatment of people with multi-personality disorders. And the base one of the key tenets of this approach to therapy is that a person can and should and has to be able to live with contradictions and with conflicting experiences, right? If we flip the page to number 13, here's Rabbi Schiffman explaining it again. One of the key cognitive components of dialectical behavior therapy is that it is possible to hold two opposite feelings at once. Often people get stuck in rigid thinking patterns that keep them stuck in negative ruminations. This makes it very difficult to notice or experience any positive thoughts or emotions. Dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, teaches the power of and. Instead of black and white, either or thinking, we can validate two opposite experiences and emotions at once. We can feel grief and joy, pain and pleasure simultaneously. It can be true that we are going through a very challenging experience, and we can see blessing in the situation as well. So he uses this to explain what the idea of Rabbi Broid. According, or maybe I think it's Brody. According to Rabbi Brody, this was Avraham's test. Avraham endured a difficult and painful experience, and he was able to see God's blessings. This reading helps us understand Rashi's reflection. Rashi is indicating that the secret to Sarah's success in life stems from being able to both experience the challenges and be able to identify the good in her life. At each age, she was able to both acknowledge the pain and savor the blessings. So again, right, it's to be able to see the good alongside the bad and recognize the good as good despite the challenges. And part of that is the challenge of being able, right, how you, right, what your perception is. And so that he says is even a greater challenge. It's hard to imagine, but even a greater challenge than something like the Akeda, like something, as horrible and as difficult as that seems and that sounds and that feels, right, to be able to live with these seeming opposites and contradictions is really the greater challenge, or the greatest challenge which Avraham was subject, and so that's according to this understanding why the final test is not the Akeda, but is in fact the burial of Sarah. Any thoughts or reactions to this?
Well, this is a very important insight. I mean, it's has been anyway, extremely difficult to change personality disorders. They're very difficult.
Yeah.
And borderline personality is one of the worst. Such a person, God forbid, will turn on a dime in a moment against any therapist and will threaten suicide if they don't do X, Y, or Z and all this kind of thing. I mean, the descriptions that are here are accurate and certainly in that regard. And one of the things I noticed about Rabbi Schiffman was the second line, actually. Often people get stuck in rigid thinking patterns that keep them stuck in negative ruminations.
Yeah.
That is so hard to break into and to change. And it's a part of the maturation of every person, really, to move beyond what we would call adolescent either or thinking, or even the it could be that for an adult they are absolutely obsessed with a certain set of thinking for other reasons, that also obsessions are very difficult to change. But you can see how if a person is really to grow up, they have to be able to say this and that. And Avraham and Sarah as models of that, I think are wonderful. That they really became mature people. They
Yeah.
never got stuck anywhere, really. They kept going on. I think it's appropriate to bring this in. I didn't come up in the field at the time that they had, they dialectical behavioral therapy. They didn't have it then. And so I have never practiced it with a license,
Hmm.
but
But that never
um,
stopped you, right?
well, the situation of my Black students in the inner city, oh golly gee, I mean everybody has difficult clients, I'm sure, but these children, I didn't think that I would really have the capacity to do it because it hurts so much to see so many of their troubles. But you had to work on yourself in order to do this, right?
Yeah.
And I did it as long as I could. After a while, I couldn't do it anymore. It was the teenagers that were emotionally disturbed that really sent me over the edge. I thought, oh my goodness. I had all these plans for artwork and things, and I had connections at the museum, and I was going to do this for them and that for them. They're just trying to survive. They hide their knives outside in the bushes before they come in, and I mean, gosh,
Well,
really, really tough stuff.
well,
But this is so good and mature and helpful, and it is a very interesting way to look at the two of them. It also raises the question of why the things that are in the parsha for Chayei Sarah, and the whole parsha is called Chayei Sarah.
yeah.
So the Rebbe takes a variation in a way of these ideas that her mission and ideals were clearly passed on. So
Hmm.
that's another really reassuring message to everyone. Something is maybe very hard. It may be that other people don't see it immediately, but some people will see it, and Hashem will see to it that it gets carried on. I mean, Abraham even went to the extent to send away the children of Keturah, they came to call her Hagar, move them out of the country, send them over to the Indus Valley, wherever
Yeah.
they went, God
Yeah.
love them, in order to keep a kind of particularism which marked her life. And so anyway, yeah, this is such good stuff. It really is. It's really good. Um, it's
All right.
really
I thought
important.
so too. All right. Go ahead, Arthur. Yeah.
No, I didn't think.
Oh, okay. So one more sort of similar approach, explanation of something with a similar type of approach, also from Rabbi Dr. Schiffman. Um, this comes from, I think, an earlier book, or I don't know if this is a book or a website that he has, but anyway. Um, so in the description of Sarah's death, right? Batamat Sarah b'Kiryat Arba hi Chevron, be'eretz Canaan. Sarah dies in Kiryat Arba, which is Chevron, in the land of Canaan. Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah v'livkota. Avraham came to eulogize Sarah and to cry for her. So the Netziv, right? Many point out, right? I had always heard it in the name of Rabbi Soloveitchik, but others before Rabbi Soloveitchik say the same thing, right? That we know that there are two basic manifestations of mourning. Number one is like the raw emotional expression of a person who experiences loss, right? And Rabbi Soloveitchik actually says that all of our right, and the second is the rituals that we go through, right? Tearing kriya, tearing your clothing, eulogizing, burial, sitting shiva. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says very powerfully that the actions that we go through as part of Avelus, as part of mourning, are meant to bring out the emotions. Right? It raises all sorts of interesting questions. I think we've spoken about this before, right? What if a person experiences the emotions without the actions, right? What if you are crying hysterically and feeling tremendous loss without tearing your clothing? Do you still have to tear your clothing? Halacha says yes, of course, but that the true key, right, in Rabbi Soloveitchik Brisker terms, the true kiyum ha-mitzvah, the true fulfillment of the mitzvah, is when the emotion is when you're tapped into the emotional expression, and that the outward actions that halacha prescribes for us are prods to help get us there. That's a basic idea, right? So we have right, and we see that in this pasuk. Vayav Avraham lispod l'sara v'liv kota. Avraham came to eulogize Sarah and to cry for her. So the Netziv and others ask the question. It doesn't sound right, right? I mean, we normally would expect that the raw emotion comes first. Right? It should say Avraham lifkot l'sara v'lispoda. Avraham came to cry for Sarah, to mourn, to wail for her, and then to eulogize. Right? He hears that she died. He discovers that she died. You would expect that the first reaction is a raw outburst of emotion, but Avraham seems to do it differently. Right? He eulogizes her and then he cries for her. So some say that building on the medrash that says that Sarah was, the Satan appears to Sarah and shows her the image of Yitzchak on the altar, and that shocks her, right? She doesn't know that the story ends okay. She just sees that Avraham is standing over Yitzchak with a knife in his hand, and that causes, right, that's what causes her death. And so Avraham isn't aware of this until literally he gets to the tent, until he gets home. And so some explain that Avraham didn't have any moment of privacy in which he could express his emotions, right? There was no quiet moment. Everything was out in public, right? His followers, his fans, whoever it was, were there. And so he was forced to first offer the formal eulogy and the more scripted acts of mourning, and then only later did he have a moment of privacy in which he could properly express his raw emotions. That's one explanation. That's not the explanation that Rabbi Schiffman takes. And here he builds on another major psychological figure, Antonio Damasio. Right, he wrote the book, the Descartes. What's the book called? Uh,
Self comes to mind. Is that the third line from the bottom, fourth line from the bottom there?
no,
Constructing the conscious brain.
yeah, but the famous his to me his most well-known work is one about Descartes.
Oh,
It's driving me
yes,
nuts now.
Damasio.
Damasio. Descartes' error. Descartes' error.
Meditations on First Philosophy?
No, that's Descartes. Right?
Oh.
But he wrote a book called Descartes' Error.
Oh.
And I'd heard of it. Maybe it's not famous. I don't know. Like I say every time I say quote a famous Rashi in shul, right? It's only famous if you heard of it. So that's the one book of his that I heard of. So anyway, so this guy Damasio, he did again. I have no familiarity with this, but he's done his field of research is um, how the neural system, right? How brain activity um, and emotions, right? How emotions affect decision making, right? So we think of decision making as a very rational, deliberate process, but no, he says that emotions play a very prominent role, and his research is all about that. You're welcome to read the Wikipedia article or something of more substance to learn more about it. So anyway, Rabbi Schiffman wants to claim that perhaps it shouldn't be so shocking to us that Avraham does the quote more formal mourning of eulogizing Sarah before the emotional outpouring, because Avraham was a fully developed person who didn't have this disconnect between his emotions and his rationale. That it was one and the same, right? So why does Avraham first eulogize and only then weep? Perhaps the answer goes back to Damasio's research. The question assumes that logic and feeling are two distinct processes, but for Avraham, the two may have been integrated. His logic and emotions blended together, where his thinking impacted his feelings and his feelings impacted his thinking. Perhaps this is how Avraham was able to transition from loss to rebuilding so quickly. Avraham did not suppress the emotion nor get stuck in it. He was able to move forward and plan for the future by securing land, finding a wife for Yitzchak, and having more children. Right? But that this question of, well, we would have thought that the raw emotion should come first, and only then can someone more logically and rationally process and give expression, um, give words to what they're feeling. Says no, that's not necessarily the case. That if someone is really truly developed, and then their emotion and their rational sense of being aren't two different realms, but can be merged one and the same. Perhaps that's what Rabbi Soloveitchik means as well when he says that the emotion, the actions of Avelus, the tearing of Kriya, the sitting low to the ground, the not wearing leather shoes, etc., um, are meant to bring about the emotion. So maybe in the ideal sense, it comes at one and the same time, right? That your emotional outburst takes on the form of the halachic actions, but that there is no distinct. It's not two distinct processes or two distinct thoughts, but it's really one and the same. Um, is that clear? Did I do a good job on that?
Very good.
Yeah,
very good.
I found several times with rabbis saying a hesped that they will combine both things.
Yeah, I mean the point of it, and this is like very, this is very, very clear in halachic literature that part of eulogizing is meant to evoke tears and evoke crying, and some rabbis or non-rabbis are better eulogizers than others, right? The Gemara talks about there was in the time of the Gemara they used to have professional eulogizers, not rabbis, but right, and oftentimes it was women, and they would hire women to cry and to wail, and yes, but that a good eulogy and a good eulogizer really feels what they're saying, and oftentimes does give that emotional expression as well. Um, so anyway, I thought this was very interesting. It's a book. Maybe we'll revisit it. I just got an excerpt from it. I haven't made the purchase yet, but I probably will. And he his method, his approach of bringing in these sort of psychological theories, I think is quite interesting. A really for me at least, a new and fresh way of looking at the Torah and its stories. Um, and I think that these really highlights the complexity and of the lives that our avot and imahot, our patriarchs and matriarchs lived. Certainly for Sarah and Avraham, right? That looking back, and be through the prism of Kulam Shavim Latova, they were all equally good. That really drives home the point that yes, they really were good. For Sarah, they were all good, and there was nothing bad about them. For you and for me, maybe we would harp more on the bad and on the challenges and have a harder time finding the bracha and the good in if we were confronted with similar trials in our life. But the bracha and the hope is that we're able to emulate them and to see both the good, the good along with the challenging times and things that we experience.
Toward the beginning of this session, when you're talking about Avraham and Sarah and their feelings and their actions and so on and so forth. So I've read just recently I read the book by Amos Oz, Love and Love and what?
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Anyway, and a much more literary friend of mine.
A Tale of Love and Darkness.
Love and Darkness, right?
Yeah.
And he sort of said that, well, Oz was a super liberal,
Yes.
Well, I read a lot about what he had written, and there are many places where he is not an absolute anything. He had very almost like contradictory feelings, but feelings going with liberal or conservative and whatever. So it was very nice to read that, to see a person writing all these things can have many sides, can have many nature, multifaceted nature.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are pretty complicated, complex beings, right?
Rabbi, I just wanted to offer one other thing that I heard at some point over the last year, and I'm sorry, I don't know to whom to attribute it. It is something that comes out of about Hasidus, but it may have originated somewhere else. It's just a takeoff on the word for years, shanim, and reading it as shanui, changes. So that all of the changes in their lives, and by a change, one could say, well, it could be a test. It could be, various things that could bring about a major change in a person's life, but that each one of them was good. They saw the good past all these in all of these changes. So perhaps that would be a way to describe what was going on there.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about that idea a lot with Rosh Hashanah, right? Is also the same shoresh.
Yes, that's right.
The beginning of our changing, right? The beginning of our
right.
Yeah.
And of course, it brings up the question of the Sephirot, the attributes, in which there are 10. 7 of them are emotions, and 3 of them are intellectual. And then there is the crown, the will, the want, the why, at the top of the heap there. But they all have to be integrated well with one another. That's the goal. And Avraham Avinu did a lot of work on himself, and his wife did as well, before they ever really responded to Hashem's mission. It says in various places in the Midrash and in Chassidus, it's understood that way, that they had prepared themselves. In other words, they had the capacity to be really mature, giving, thoughtful, good people, but could take all of the changes. And so Hashem said, "Okay, yeah, they're very good. I've got to recruit them. I got to get them." They're
keepers, right?
Yeah, they're keepers. That's right. For all time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yasher koach, everyone. Thank you. This was
thank you so much.
Have a wonderful rest of the night, a wonderful rest of the week, and
thank you.
See you on Shabbos.
God willing, we look forward to seeing you there.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.